Prominent human rights lawyer Femi Falana says former President Umaru Yar'Adua rejected the sale of the Port Harcourt and Kaduna refineries to a consortium led by Dangote Oil because his predecessor, Olusegun Obasanjo, failed to follow due process in the transaction. On Thursday, Obasanjo said the late president turned down a $750 million offer from Aliko Dangote, chairman of the Dangote Group, to manage the Port Harcourt and Kaduna refineries in 2007. He added that his administration had plans to tackle the challenges faced by the Port Harcourt, Warri and Kaduna refineries during his tenure. However, Falana in a statement countered his narrative, saying Obasanjo had sold a 51% stake in the Port Harcourt refinery to Bluestar Oil for $561 million. He added that Bluestar Oil was a consortium comprising Dangote Oil, Zenon Oil, and Transcorp. And for more on this, we're joined by energy expert Nick Agule. Good evening. Glad to have you join me on the news.
Good evening. Good evening to our viewers.
All right. Let me kick off by asking you, what are the legal and, of course, regulatory implications of Obasanjo's decision to bypass the National Council on Privatization and the sale of the refineries?
Thank you very much for the question. If we go back to 2007, which was President Obasanjo's last year in office, as he was serving his second term, there was a flurry of activities in terms of privatization, specifically the refineries. And he sold stakes in the Port Harcourt and Kaduna refineries. And just as Femi Falana, the renowned senior advocate of Nigeria, has said, the Council of Privatization, which the Vice President was the head, was charged with the responsibility for doing that. But let's not forget that in Nigeria, the office of the Vice President is not an office on its own. That is an office that is jointly held with that of the President. There are places where the Vice President can be elected on a different party platform from the President, but that's not the case in Nigeria. The powers of the Vice President are resident in the powers of the President. So even though the Privatization Act did say the Vice President is the chairman, it's not to say that the President, using his executive powers, couldn't have presided over the privatization of the country, of the country's government-owned enterprises. But that be as it may, we know that in the aftermath of the privatization, which was at the twilight of the Obasanjo years, a lot of agitations happened thereafter, where people thought that the refineries were sold for cheap, and they went on strikes led by the labor unions. And in my mind, I know that some of those strikes and some of those agitations were being sponsored by people who did not want the refineries to work. Look, Nigerians, we shouldn't be fooled. Now we have the benefit of hindsight. We can see what has happened. From that 2007 to 2024, a period of 17 years, the refineries never worked, and we continued importation of petroleum products upon which subsidies were being paid that were subject of criminality. The same refineries, with the advent of the Dangote refinery in 2024, have now started to work, when we now know that importation of products is no longer there. So there are all sorts of games that have been happening. If you, now with the benefit of hindsight, if you ask me, I would have said it was better for us to have sold the refineries back in 2007, than to waste an additional $2 billion on their maintenance and turnaround maintenance and repair, which has not yielded any results. Even the two refineries that have now been said by the NNPCL to have been commissioned, they are enmeshed in controversy as to whether They are producing PMS, which is premium motor spirit, or petrol as popularly called, which is the fuel that we mostly use in Nigeria. The controversy is still raging. So if these refineries had gone to private sector operators and they had invested their money and got the refineries up and running, we will be in a much better position today than what we are now.
Mr. Agule.
So that's the position.
Just to follow your train of thoughts, Mr. Agule, you talked about the private sector being in charge of our refineries, but then what key criteria should be followed to ensure the privatization of national assets like refineries to serve long-term interests of the nation and, of course, the people of the country?
Yeah, of course, the process to follow for privatization of national assets should be that which gives Nigeria the best value for money. Yeah, so the process has to be transparent, has to be open, and has to be legitimate to attract foreign and domestic investors who have the capacity to do it. We had a privatization in the telecoms, and it was a privatization that was used as a political settlement instrument. We handed over licenses, especially the discos, to politically exposed persons. And we see the danger that privatization has caused to Nigeria. As we speak today, there is no investment in the power sector, and we continue to have grid collapses, whereas the tariffs are going up. If your transformer blows up today, you are not going to get a disco to buy it for you. You have to buy it yourself, same as a meter. So that is the kind of danger that we face when privatization is not done well. So privatization has to be done in a way that it is competent operators who have the financial, administrative, and technical capacity to run that particular sector that should come in. The kind of thing that happened in telecoms, where the MTNs and the Airtels of this world already were telecoms operators, and we can see the successes of that privatization exercise.
Now, talking about privatization, Mr. Agule, in your view now, how has the handling of refinery privatization affected now the overall performance of Nigeria's refining capacity and the country's dependence on imported fuel?
Okay, so the privatization of the refineries itself was stillborn because shortly after the Obasanjo government privatized them, they left office, and the Yar'Adua government inherited a lot of crises with them and reversed them. And so since then, we haven't privatized any of the refineries again. And it is something that I believe that the government of President Tinubu should look into again. Because the more these refineries are with the NNPCL, the more misery we are going to face with them, because the NNPCL have shown over time that they are incompetent in maintaining and running these refineries profitably for us. And we have a 445,000 barrels per day nameplate capacity buried in this refinery, which we need to unlock, and unlock desperately. Because as we have it today, we have the Dangote Refinery, 650,000 barrels per day refinery, refining there in Lagos. They are not going to give us fair pricing unless they face competition. With that competition, Dangote can call any price for us, and we'll be expected to pay. But when we have these 445,000 barrels capacity refineries come on stream, they will provide a needed competition to Dangote Refinery, and only then Nigerians will be able to buy petroleum products at fair prices.
Well, indeed, we hope that is achieved as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your perspective on the news. Energy expert Nick Agule, many thanks indeed for your insights.